Hi, my name is Bruce Burklow, and I'm glad that you have tuned in today to my online YouTube channel. In episode one, we talked about a psychological contagion that has kind of gotten hold of our culture. The unbelievable is being believed, the incredible is becoming the norm, and the negative is becoming the positive. Everything seems to be turned upside down. The false is becoming the true. The lie is becoming the real. So that's what's happening. And there are several things that are going along that line. I gave an illustration in episode one that if I wanted you to buy a horse, and I, I would say because horseback riding is great, but then you find out that I own horses. Then you find out I own all the horses. You can't even buy a horse unless it's by me. Then I own all the barns where you would board. I own all the horse trailer manufacturers that you would buy a horse trailer. I own all the Western stores that you would buy the saddle and the clothes. Then you would see that I have another agenda. That's what I want to talk about today. The agenda is really not to make you happier or to make you more identified and defined in your walk of life to be more fulfilled. The agenda actually is to create a new social construct that is called social engineering. You say, well, what is social engineering? Let me give you just a quick thumbnail sketch. Remember the 50s? Do you remember the 50s? Now, I was born, but I don't remember the 50s. If you'll see some of the 50s movies, you'll see the sleeve rolled up, and you'll see the cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve. And the TV shows were all sponsored by Viceroy, Winston, Camel, and so on. And you'll notice that in every skit, the comedy skit, the talk show skit, didn't matter what it was, somebody was smoking because they had socially engineered that smoking was cool, that it was accepted, that this is what you should do. We didn't realize that 20 years later, 30 years later, all the people we saw smoking in the sitcoms, the talk shows, and in the movies died with emphysema, lung cancer, throat cancer, and so on. They didn't tell you that part, did they? There is data that has not been researched, but yet they're going full stern ahead, full speed ahead with an ideology, and they're changing our social construct. They're changing through social engineering. We're no longer rolling our sleeves up with a pack of cigarettes. We're no longer smoking one right after another. We're no longer dying with emphysema because of smoking, because it was an accepted thing. But yet we are still dying at an alarming rate. Our kids are committing suicide at an alarming rate. And even those kids that have gone through all types of surgeries and procedures, they're now looking at 7 years out. And that's when the suicide rate begins again. So I'm going to kill myself if I don't become somebody else. I become somebody else, I'm not going to kill myself. But 7 years out, I can't deal with what I have become. That's the ugly truth of what is going on. So now I think you have to ask yourself, who is behind all of this? Well, I do believe there is a changing of social engineering for the purpose of control. The cigarette companies sponsored the TV shows, sponsored the movies. If you remember, if you go on YouTube, you can look up old TV shows, the Honeymooners and Andy Griffith and everything. And you'll notice that some of them were sponsored. Tonight's episode is sponsored by Viceroy. I love watching The Texan, which is Rory Calhoun. And it is a cigarette that sponsored that show in 1958. In fact, one of the commercials shows a very dignified man in a smoking jacket, and he's putting himself off as an intellect, and he's smoking a Viceroy. And the announcer says, a thinking man's cigarette. I'm thinking about that statement right there, a thinking man's cigarette. So this cigarette is cool because it makes you a thinker. And because you are a thinker, you will smoke this cigarette. Think about that for a moment. What are our kids wanting most of all? They want to be accepted. They don't want to be the wallflower at the dance. They want to be accepted. They want to be loved. They want to be appreciated. They want to belong. Well, Viceroy is a thinking man's cigarette. And it's cool. And it's neat. So I'll buy Viceroy. And that will make me be looked upon as a deep thinker, as an intellectual, as a man that knows what's going on. Nothing could be further from the truth. Then 30 years later, I die of emphysema, lung cancer. This is what's happening. We don't know all of the data 20 years from now, even 10 years from now. But I do know this. There is an insane push to re-identify social constructs, to re-identify value systems, to re-identify all kinds of definitions. Now, I grew up in the hippie movement, and there needed to be some changes. Yes, there did. I'm not against change. There were some things, my next door neighbor mowed his grass in a white shirt and black tie. Mowed his grass that way because men were not casual. Nowadays, grown men dress like teenagers. They, cargo shorts and an old T-shirt and a pair of flip-flops. And yet, they probably have more money than me because that's just the norm of the look. So I'm not talking against that. I'm just saying that's how things change. But there are certain values that don't change. There are certain premises that cannot change because if they change, then we will have a problem. But yet there is a socialistic move to tear down everything. Now, maybe the man mowing the grass in a white shirt and black tie, maybe we need to tear that down. I don't have a problem with that. But I certainly don't need to tear down that I take him out of the family and say he's unimportant as a father. I don't need to tear down that construct. But that is what is happening. Social engineering is tearing down. They're lifting up the absurd, and they're tearing down that which brings stability. On another episode, I'm going to be talking about the new AI, artificial intelligence, that's going on in our churches. It's going on. Jesus is actually been artificially reproduced. And you can actually talk to him like you were to talk to me right now. Ask him your questions, and he will answer your questions. That's for another episode. Let's continue this episode. In our episode 1, we talked about what is truth. This is episode 2. What is truth about belief systems? In Kenya, over 300 people have starved themselves to death. Why? Because their preacher, I don't even want to call him a pastor. I want to call him an idiot. I want to call him a charlatan. He told them the only way to get to heaven is to starve yourself to death. And I don't even know where he gets that. I mean, I know it's not in Scripture, but I'm talking about how he gets that psychologically to inform the people that doesn't even make any kind of sense. But I remember back in the 90s, there was a Hale-Bopp theory that people said that a meteorite was coming to planet Earth. And so there were several that went to a house and put themselves in a bunk bed system, and they laid down and they killed themselves because the Hale-Bopp meteorite was coming. And if they were to die, then that meteorite would somehow transform them into heavenly beings. So in Kenya, 300 people have starved themselves to death. They recently have found the mass graves, and because of their spiritual leader, not a witch doctor, no, a very well-respected viceroy smoker, thinker, in a smoking jacket, the thinking man's cigarette, the thinking man's belief system, the thinking man's spirituality. He told them if they wanted to get to heaven, they should starve themselves to death. That's not true. That's not what Jesus said. That's not what our American belief system is about living life. We don't believe that, but that is what is happening. Did you know in California there is a bill going through right now that would clearly classify a parent that if they did not affirm a child's gender, that is child abuse, and the parent could lose custody of their child. You say, well, that's not going to happen. Well, it happened in Canada already. There's a dad that has spent time in jail because his daughter said, I'm a boy, and you're going to call me a boy in this house, and if you don't, I'm going to report you to the authorities. And she did. She reported him to the authorities. And the authorities came and knocked on the door and put him in jail and charged him with child abuse. Again, back to episode 1. I believe that if that's what you want to do, what you want to be, I believe it needs to start with 18. Kids are too impressionable. Kids can be manipulated. Kids can have feelings that are not true. I mean, how many girls break up with a guy and she cries for 3 days and all of a sudden she has a smile and she's got another ring around her neck because she's going steady with another guy. And the guys are the same way. However, I did read where a guy was broken up with. The girl broke up with him. They're high schoolers now. We're not adults here. High schoolers, 17 years old. He shows up at the restaurant in Florida where his former girlfriend and her mother are eating lunch. And she becomes uncomfortable, the girlfriend does, the daughter. She becomes uncomfortable because he has been after her for the last several months since they broke up. He's, tried to bother her or whatever. The mother even thought about getting a restraining order on him. The mother and the daughter leave the restaurant, go to the car. He comes out with a knife and he stabs her 15 times. Thank God she does not die. Stabs her 15 times, stabs the mother. There are 2 onlookers that rush and he stabs them. And they finally get him subdued and he slices his throat, but he does not die. He's in the hospital. Now he's charged. Why did it so mentally and emotionally affect him by the breakup that he was willing to hurt others? You've heard the old adage, hurt people hurt people. You've got to settle your own hurts, your own unforgivenesses, your own bitterness, your own resentment. You cannot live in a society carrying the weight that you have been abused, you've been molested, you've been put down. You've got to get over it, even if it's true. You've got to get over it for the good of yourself. You've got to have a good feeling about yourself that if this girl breaks up with you, I'm going to survive. I'm going to live. My world is not ended. I'm going to live. Now, it may hurt, and my heart may be broken, but I'm going to live. The truth is, our teenagers are reacting to everything. It's not just transgenderism. It's not just to wokeness. They're reacting to everything. They say this is the most unhappy generation there has ever been. They say that this generation has to be touched socially more than 7 times a day. What do you mean by that? I mean, even in our churches, they have social media pastors that text all day, Instagram all day, TikTok all day, Facebook all day. So their parishioners, especially their young parishioners, can get something from the church. That social connection keeps them connected where they'll come to church next week. This social connection is becoming so real that if you don't like me and you tell me you don't like me in a text, I am so devastated that I kill myself. I may not even know you. I may never have had a relationship with you. You just might be a follower of my Instagram. And you type out, Bruce, I think your nose is too big, and I think you look too old. And I'm devastated. Oh my God. There's no reason for me to live anymore. Wait a minute, Bruce, you have a wife, you have a family, or if I was a teenager, you have parents that love you, you have siblings that love you, but it doesn't matter. Their love is not balanced out by the followers' hate. The person that follows them carries more weight with their dislike of them than other followers carry who like them. Because we're developing a generation that is so triggered that they are triggered in the area of their own psychological weakness because they have been engineered to be triggered and to be woke and to react to everything that comes their way. So what's the idea for you if you're a parent? What should you do if you're a teenager watching this today? You've got to embrace another set of values and principles and even identity that's more sure than what society is giving you. We all know that much of the fast food that we're eating, some of it is even plant-based, and we think it's beef. Well, you do not think that your high schools, your colleges, your professors, your teachers are giving you plant-based knowledge, and yet you think it's beef? I mean by that, beef would be, for my sake of my illustration, beef would be the strong, the sure, the secure, the identity of what is real. And plant-based would be, it tastes like beef, it fills up like beef, but yet the definition is it is not beef, it is plant-based and genetically altered in itself. So I'm eating something that I think is real, but it's unreal. I'm digesting something that I think is real, but it's not real. I have misidentified it. And that's what's happening in our culture right now. We are misidentifying real truths, real values, real wokeness, real acceptance, love. We are misidentifying. This is the channel where you can get wisdom, you can get information, you can get some understanding. Proverbs 4:7 says, wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and with all thy getting, get understanding. Thank you for watching today. Be sure and like and subscribe. Until next time, we will see you. Bye-bye.